All right, everybody. So we got another episode of the podcast here with Kina Collins in our campaign office. I'm John McCombs, our operations manager. So last night, Kina, we had a candidate forum out on the west side of Chicago. Yes. There you go. Shout out Chicago Black Voter Project and then all the organizers there. But interesting moment from that evening was specifically around Representative LaShawn Ford, who is also running in this race, who came forward and said that he was responsible for passing no cash bail.
Ending cash bail. It's a safety act, to be exact.
Yeah, and so you had some words regarding that, and I'll let you kind of get the audience up to speed on how that went down.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think we face a challenge in Illinois where politicians like to take the credit for really powerful movements that are built by the people and built by very diverse coalitions that come together for a common cause. And the Safety Act was one of those coalitions where there was a lot of postcard writing, door knocking, lobbying, bird dogging, legislators to get on board, because really the architects of the Safety Act believe, in the coalition believe, that it's a poverty tax, right? To make people sit in jail because they can't afford bail, especially for nonviolent offenses. And last night at the forum, we actually had the opportunity to speak to one of the gentlemen who is a part of the formerly incarcerated, or he is formerly incarcerated, and he said in the 90s, he sat in Cook County for 6 months for $100 bail because he could not make it, or anybody in his family could not pay that bail. So that was how deep, that coalition went. It really unlocked a very dark and treacherous time in Illinois criminal justice system, or injustice system, however you want to see it. And it really was a people-powered movement. So for Representative Ford, who he did vote yes on the Safety Act, to take the credit for that, I thought was wrong. I think any legislator who says, I passed this, is, first of all, you're operating from the wrong space. We know that a lot of people in the community, a lot of civil rights attorneys, members of the ACLU, great people, legislative aides, they craft this legislation and then they build really great coalitions around them. And what you can say as a legislator is that you voted to pass it, because that's what happened. But to say that you're fully responsible for it was just unfair. But the biggest issue, obviously, that I had with LaShawn is that he's taking an endorsement from the Fraternal Order of Police, the FOP, here in the Chicago Police Department. And this is very important, I thought, for the community to hear, because LaShawn is the pick that Danny Davis chose to take his seat. He is a front runner in this race. And so that's not to say because he's competition that people in the community know. It's a good chance that he could potentially win the seat. So people need to know he ain't gonna win because we gonna win, but people in the community need to know that, right? To inform their decisions. And for anybody who doesn't know what the FOP is, it is the police union for the Chicago Police Department. These folks in the FOP have been identified as members as Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, January 6th rioters that went to our Capitol and desecrated the Capitol in a failed coup d'etat to try to take down our government. And he's accepted an endorsement from them. How can we be the party of opposition to what is happening through a Trump regime when you are politically aligning yourself with the very people that we are pushing back on? And so if you're going to take credit for things like the Safety Act, right, which is, it is criminal justice reform work, transformational justice work, you have to live out those values. Like, you can't, out of one side of your mouth, say that you supported it, and then out of the other side of your mouth, politically align yourself with people who tried to destroy it.
Yeah.
And John, because you were a candidate, that the people who fund your campaign, who support you in your campaign, They are your political apparatus. And so that was just strictly my question for the representative was, how do you reconcile that? You know, when it's time for us to throw down for criminal justice reform work on the federal level, and you're getting pushback from your buddies in the FOP, how do we reconcile you listening to the community versus you being politically pressured by the police union here in the Chicago Police Department? And so, and just the final thing on that, when I say they were in opposition to the Safety Act, they were in opposition, meaning they took it all the way up to the courts to claim that this ending cash bail was unconstitutional. And obviously they did not win that battle, but that's not to say that they will not continue that fight to try to restore cash bail in the state of Illinois. And I think it's very regressive and it's very dangerous. And I view the FOP, I want to be very clear on my stance on the FOP. The FOP is a white supremacist breeding ground in the city of Chicago, and that's not how I feel about it. Loretta Lynch from the Department of Justice, after the Laquan McDonald shooting, the tape was released. She came to the city of Chicago and investigated CPD, and hundreds of pages of investigative work that the DOJ did. They found systematic racism. They found torture tactics being used on Black folks, right? They found targeting of Black people and brown people and immigrants in our city by CPD. And at the helm of all of that and the core of all of that was the FOP. So the fact that you can be okay with that is not okay with me.
Yeah. So
that's my long way of saying, LaShawn K. Ford, give the FOP endorsement back. Mind you, he's still my state rep. So, and I'm gonna say this because he said it at the forum after we all, weren't mic'd up and everything. But I we exchanged words afterwards, and I said, I'm very disappointed that you've taken this endorsement. Like, this is not even about us being opponents. This is about me being your constituent, the role that you play as a Black man, as a public figure in our community, in a very Black district. His state rep district is extremely Black as well. And we have been the target of the FOP for decades. That is not, once again, how I feel about it. That is the facts, the immutable facts about it. And he said, well, you're my constituent, so if you want me to give the FOP endorsement back, you got to protest me. That's what he said. That's what he said, y'all. We got to protest him. So
when and where?
Right. So it's like, if you want the smoke, be careful for asking for that, because we just might oblige to your request. But I think that every voter needs to be paying attention to that right now. Yeah. And we say this a lot on the campaign trail, that like, it's not about who's on your endorsement list, it's who's in opposition to you. But in this case, it really is who's supporting you, because I think that is absolutely nefarious that the FOP is backing you.
Yeah. It's been an interesting week of endorsements, announcements.
No! It's been very normal in Illinois 7, very boring.
Yeah, no, we've had another endorsement drop in, or I don't know if I can call it an endorsement per se, but definitely a huge ad buy for another candidate to about $2.8 million in advertising spend. APAC.
That was how much money?
$2.8 million.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
So APAC, with their super PAC kind of shell political organization, they do this where they, make these shell PACs.
Generic names like United Democracy Project is the one that's coming into Illinois 7, UDP, and this is not their first time. Mm-hmm. They have targeted this district back in 2024. I always tell the story of how I was the only candidate in the state of Illinois that they spent money against, and UDP was the one that facilitated that. And so now they're coming in support of a candidate for the seat, and it's the city treasurer. So
yeah.
And
who was not at the forum last night?
Oh, she Melissa, come on, girl. We wanted to talk to you. Come out. Yeah. Come out to the forum. We would like to speak with you.
Yep.
And we are also her constituents, because she is the city treasurer for the entire city of Chicago. So everybody who was sitting in that room, regardless of if they were Illinois 7 or not, if they lived in the city of Chicago, was a constituent of Melissa Conyers Irvin, and she bailed. She did not show up.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
But you know, they don't call us the GWS, the Great West Side, for nothing. Some people can handle the heat, and some people just cannot. They cannot. And I think that this is a very telling moment in democracy and like politics and modern political history, is that like, who can handle the pressure right now and who's ducking? And she's ducking.
Yeah.
And I don't think, my prediction is, and maybe we could do a bet, I don't think Melissa gonna show up to not a single candidates forum. From now until March 17th, she will not show her face at this candidates forum, because she knows what time it is.
Yeah.
So
well, you'll see her face every
every day,
every YouTube ad break for the
next 5 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Brought to you by APAC.
Yeah. But going back to kind of what we were talking about with you know, the cash bail thing. So obviously, you know, that is a form of what I wanted to get into talking about tonight, which was like around criminal justice reform. Obviously that being a segment of it, but a lot more work to be done. So I just wanted to kind of talk to you about some of the ideas around the reforms that you would like to see done in regard to criminal justice, and how it can make a more, you know, I see it as part of building a more equitable society, and, you know, addressing some of the past harms. We'll get more into that later on, but also I just want to get your initial thoughts on like what you kind of would like to see done in terms of criminal justice.
Well, I think that people often describe our criminal justice system in America as broken, and I disagree with that. I think it's working exactly how it was created, and I often call it the criminal injustice system. And we live in a very unique district where we live amongst directly impacted people, formerly incarcerated people, those who are part of the reentry community, coming from prison, coming from jail, back into the community. And the reason why the person who gets to see has to have a strong moral clarity about that is because these folks who are being re-entered back into our society after being incarcerated are coming back to communities that are in shambles. We don't have proper housing. We're dealing with medical apartheid. We don't have primary care physicians or safety net programs that are being gutted by the Trump administration. They're coming back to communities where if they have young children, there's no neighborhood schools for their children to go to. If they want to start a family, there's not even a grocery store and a certain mile radius that they could go to without having to drive to the suburbs in order to get it. And so there's so many barriers that are being created for formerly incarcerated people in our very big district that I think, once again, we could serve as a national model on how to change that across the country. So we deal with something in Illinois 7 called $1 Million Blocks, which means that the government spends $1 million to the tune of $100 million a year incarcerating people. So this conversation where I called Representative Ford out, it was during the question of Medicare for all. Like, it was after, I was making my rebuttal, or he was making his rebuttal rather, during that, and it was connected. Because instead of that $100 million going towards our healthcare system, it's going towards incarcerating people for nonviolent offenses. And so instead of it going towards our education, our housing, right? We know housing and fresh produce, all of those are social determinants of health. Our money is being used in the wrong ways. And I think that we should be building strong local economies, not off of private prisons, but offer like sustainable jobs, right, that can work in our community. And so I see the criminal justice system in a very different way, because I've been surrounded around the reentry community and formerly incarcerated and directly impacted my entire life. And the way that I see them is as my neighbor, as my cousins, as, my friends. And so I don't see them as incarcerated peoples, right? So, and that's the design that our criminal justice system is supposed to be, which is reform. It's supposed to be rehabilitation, but it has been extremely punitive.
Yeah.
And we're trying to steer away from that.
Well, it's always been, to me, like, obviously it's all correlated. Like, police are very much part of the criminal justice system. Obviously, you have that line to talk about, like, the bullet was flying well before anybody pulled the triggers. It was flying when the grocery store closed down, when the daycare center closed down, when the schools were closed down. So de-investing in communities adds to crime, the growth and expansion of crime. And then the insidious part to me is when private businesses come in and are now being like, I'm going to run a business that is literally incarcerating people. And how do you make profit in any business is by maximizing, maximizing your productivity or your product, if you will. And when that commodity is human beings, like that can't be something that I see. It's a moral failure when we set up a private business to have a human beings as their commodity.
And I mean, what a way to segue to talk about capitalism and how it's dangerous and detrimental to our society, and we have to like evolve as an economy and as a political theory on how we run our country. But yeah, I mean, police in themselves were slave catchers, right? Chattel slavery was, people being used as commodity to build up an American empire and like our economy and to build America up to the superpower that it is today. And so I have a very hard red line stance on ending prison slave labor because yikes, they are forcing those who are incarcerated to build up economic empires for billionaires and millionaires. So companies like Victoria's Secret, right? Even your local DMV that they print the license plates, right, for cars. And this is why this fight doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's all intersectional, because this leads into the conversation of fighting for a federal minimum wage raise. Right? In the 1970s, that was the first prison union that was ever formed. And then the Supreme Court came back because there was so much people power behind that. They came back, the Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional for prisoners to unionize. But why? They're working. They have work conditions. As a matter of fact, the working area that they are working in is the area they live in and eat in. So the conditions have to be improved across the board. These men are getting paid like 25 cents, like an hour. They don't get healthcare benefits in prison. So the little money that they are saving up doesn't even cover the cost of the healthcare that some of them need. And so this goes way beyond like whether you believe people should be in prisons or not. Like, if you believe that we should raise the federal minimum wage in this country, that includes those who are incarcerated because they are working. If you believe that factory workers on a Ford automobile line deserve a raise, then that's the same thing that should be happening for those who are incarcerated right now. Right? And so if you believe in quality living standards, that should be the standard that you hold, because this is where these folks are living, right? This is where they live at. And we hear awful work conditions happening in prisons, in jails, like no air in the summertime, no air conditioning in the summertime, no heat in the winter, right? Bed bug outbreaks. Staph infections, like just the standard of living is really bad.
Well, I was going to say, it goes back to this. I've always looked at this particular topic through, like, we have to change how we frame our viewpoint of prison. What is the role of prison? Like, is it to punish,
right,
or is it to rehabilitate? And if we are a punishment model, which is what we currently are, we are focused solely on making it as miserable as possible to try and deter crime, which, surprise, surprise, after 250 years, it hasn't deterred crime.
Yeah. Right.
It's doing the same thing over and over again.
Right. I mean, if like prisons are the thing, it's the same arguments I make about guns. Like, if prisons were the things that kept us safe, the United States would be the safest country on the planet because we're the most incarcerated peoples on the planet. So, same thing with guns. If guns kept us safe, then we'd be the safest country because we have the most guns of anybody and access to guns, right? And so it's that same idea, like, this model is not working, it's outdated, it's antiquated, and it's cruel and unusual, which is unconstitutional in so many ways. And so I believe in, incarcerated people having the right to unionize, especially if you're working. I believe that those companies who are turning these prisons into sweatshops need to pay their workers a livable wage. I believe that they should get access to healthcare benefits and a 401k or a pension or whatever your benefits package is. Why are they treated differently than the folks who are on the outside of the wall? And I think that othering is what causes so much increased recidivism, which we deal with here in Illinois 7, where it's sickening. People come out of prison, they try to get on their feet, there's no housing, there's no jobs, they're not being equipped with certain skills, and then they go to an illicit market to make money because we live in a capitalistic society and you gotta survive, and this is the place that's hiring, is the open air drug market. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why wouldn't you?
The recidivism rate alone is absolutely absurd. The odds of somebody getting out and then, being rearrested at some point. And typically it's for, parole violations.
That's
it's not
right.
even for necessarily they go out and they
Commit another crime, right?
Exactly. It is, they just whatever the violation was.
Don't have money to get to the parole officer, to get on the bus to go to the parole officer.
Didn't make it on time, etc. Right. And then also, like, we have to talk about the get out, and then who's their support system. It's the same people that they were hanging out with in the first place. Some of these people are still, involved in crime because they don't have any other opportunities. So they're just hanging out with their friends, their neighbors. And, like, those people perhaps get arrested or have run-ins with the police, and they're just there, right? So you're asking them to come out and completely abandon their support system, try and
figure it out.
Yeah, figure it out. And
with a record.
Exactly.
With a record.
Any job that's going to be.
I don't know if y'all seen them apartment applications, but they're asking for you to do a lot, like three times the rent.
Yeah.
You got to have a perfect background. You can't have any priors in your background. I mean, all type of stuff.
Yeah, and that limits people's geographic opportunities. It limits people's job opportunities. It limits so many ways in which people can try and get ahead because we're so focused on retribution as opposed to rehabilitation.
And so a couple of things. I really got into criminal justice reform work or transformational justice because it is, first of all, I have directly impacted family member. I'm a directly impacted family member. That's number one. And I'm obviously in protest, I get arrested. So I've dealt with that legal barrier of things. I've been very fortunate to have a good, solid network, right? And people who can vouch for me and, like, we don't need to do a background check on you. We know that you went to a protest and you got arrested 6 times or, whatever.
Yeah. My
My mom is always joking, like, you're the most arrested child I've ever had. She's like, what are you gonna do if people just, like, run your background? I'm like, run it. You know what I mean?
You got a punch card.
Right. I mean, one of the most inspiring things that I had learned was that Dr. King had been arrested 30-something times between a span of, like, 2 years in the civil rights movement. And that is something that they dangle over your head because they know that once you're in the system, it creates a ton of barriers for you, from not being able to vote, to not being able to get housing, to not being able to go to school and apply for things like federal grants, right? So the system is working exactly as it is intended to work. And we're seeing this administration weaponized that system and say, well, if you don't agree with us, we know what barriers we can put in front of you. That even if you survive being arrested in these protests and sitting through these holding cells and stuff, you're going to struggle with housing. You're going to struggle with education and furthering your career. You're going to struggle with X, Y, and Z. So I think that's important. But I got into it because of gun violence prevention. And one of the first things that you learn in gun violence is you study it as a public health crisis versus just a crime that's happening, is that people who are arrested and incarcerated, the more times, the more likely you are to be a victim of homicide. So you're like 4 or 5 times more likely to be a victim of homicide if you have been arrested. And so that was a startling statistic for me when I heard that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is the correlation there? And it's exactly how you described it, John, which was like, you come out and they unrealistically think you're supposed to abandon your support system, or the people who you've known your entire life who are also in this very shitty system.
Yeah.
And any little infraction will throw you right back in. And so every time that you come out a little bit worse because you're desperate.
Yeah.
Right? You're desperate to make a living. You're desperate to just stay above water. And that leads to, more violent crimes. And we don't do enough studies, in my opinion, or rather talk about it enough, the trauma that is inflicted on incarcerated people, and then when they have to be reintegrated back into community and society, and how you go from living basically in a shoebox.
Yeah.
To being thrown out into the ocean, right?
And even to I think, and I'm trying to make a parallel here, and I know it's not a one-to-one, but my experience being in the Marine Corps, I've seen guys who have gone to war,
right,
gone to combat, been in life or death situations, and regardless of whether they were in high intensity, firefights, or they were just on a base somewhere, and maybe got shelled once, there's a little bit of them that changes, at least a little bit. And so that type of trauma, we understand that when soldiers come back from war, there is a type of trauma that they have gone through and that stays with them. And why would that not be true for somebody who has entered the penal system as well, where they're now stripped away, they have no control over their lives.
Right.
They are put in a situation where they are treated as less than human beings,
right,
and thrown in alongside other people who are treated as less than human beings, and are told to survive and good luck for however long. And so why would that person not come out a little bit worse for having gone through that?
I think it's a holistic approach of what we could be doing, but the start of that and the bedrock of that, in my opinion, is that we treat them as human.
Yeah.
And we don't other formerly incarcerated people, right? We don't other them in our society, but we do look at them as paying their due for whatever they went to prison or jail from, which that's a controversial topic, because we know there are some people who took plea deals just because they thought that was the best option, or were pressured in doing that.
The system kind of relies on it.
Yeah.
If every case went to trial, the whole system would collapse, and they know that.
Well, private prisons. It's the reason why we don't take corporate PAC money, or private equity money, is because the whole business model of a private prison is that they have to fill those bids up some way.
Yes.
And they get contracts through the state, they get contracts through the Fed. And so the business model is to turn people into the bid warmers of these detention centers.
And it's
that they're building up.
multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yep, multi-billion-dollar industry, and we would be surprised how many elected officials actually take campaign donations from groups like the GEO Group, which is the second largest private prison contractor and detention center contractor in the globe, right here in our district. That was one of my critiques of Congressman Davis, was that he took campaign donations from the GEO group. So even people, and Congressman Davis was the architect of the Second Chance Act. The way that I view it is we got to get it right on the first chance, though. We have to make it so that people don't need a second chance and that they can avoid, having to go to prison and be put into the system.
Well, one thing I wanted, and before we move on to the next subject, I wanted to talk briefly about was I've been a proponent of the Nordic model, and I've lived in Finland for some time, so I've got a little more familiarity with it. But essentially, what it basically comes down to is that transferring from that punitive focus on prison to that rehabilitative focus. So when you see a prison in Finland or Norway, it looks like a summer camp. You're shocked at you're thinking this is a minimum security thing, perhaps these are nonviolent, these are murderers. Wow. These are rapists, and they are living in cabins in the woods and are given access to knives for cooking, and they go they live like humans. They do yoga, they do meditation, but to that, and they have a very their sentencing is very you would be shocked at the sentencing that goes on there, because it's maximum is 12 years, and so
and that's extreme.
Yeah,
right.
But but the recidivism rate there is so low, and it's, to me, I'm I know this is such to many people I think it would be such a radical idea, but it goes back to this whole idea that I've heard all times, facts don't care about feelings. Well, we have a feelings-based criminal justice system, and so when that is the case, that person did a crime, I want to see them punished. I want them to pay for that.
I want to snatch their life. People have gotten 60 years, 70 years. I mean, I just think that the inception of being captured, right? What does that, we're in Black History Month. What does that, do we really sit with that sometimes as Americans about what it meant to be enslaved and captured?
Yeah. When
you did nothing wrong. And you still got punished, you still got tortured, you still got maimed, because you needed to acquiesce to the system. Yeah. And so I sit with that a lot and think about that a lot. That it's what in us as humans thinks that it's okay to snatch the ability for people to grow and change, right? No matter how heinous the crime is. Now, some people feel and I think this is a good topic to talk about, in the sense of we're in the age of more and more people talking about the abolition of ICE. And what does that mean and what does that look like? Well, when you start to speak about abolition, you have to come from it from a place of forgiveness. And that if we abolish it, we don't want to become the system that we're trying to break down. We're trying to be better. We're abolishing it because this system cannot be reformed, right? It's beyond the place of reform.
Yeah.
There are spaces in the arc of abolition where you talk about repair, and we need to talk a little bit about reparations and what that means. But we don't preach and teach that enough in our culture and in our society, because our country was literally a country built by stolen people on a stolen land.
Yeah.
So of course, if you commit the act of stealing something and then you don't want to give it back, violence will ensue. And that is what is happening. So when I say the phrase of the bullet was flying in the air long before anybody pulled the trigger, there is physical violence and then there's structural violence. The criminal justice system is structural and sometimes physical, a lot of time physical, but it is structurally built to be harmful, specifically to Black Americans. And now we see more and more immigrants, brown folks who disproportionately make up huge populations of jails and prisons, and we're seeing an uptick of women. We are in a country where our legislators think it is appropriate to have a woman who is pregnant and in labor, actively in labor, if she's in prison, shackled to the bed as she goes through labor. That is so inhumane to me. Yeah. Like, but it tells you who we value, right? Here we have the Epstein files, some of the most heinous crimes that that were being committed, allegations of cannibalism to an entire sex trafficking ring of children. And the people who are allegedly a part of those files are some of the most powerful people in the world who coincidentally happen to be white men, right? And so we have to ground ourselves in movement work. We've got to ground ourselves as politicians. We have to ground ourselves as community activists, advocates, etc., that the system was always tilted against us. So when I go into the Black community and they're like, tough on crime, we need a war on drugs, we need X, that is to your detriment. Yeah. So when I go in on a LaShawn K. Ford for taking an FOP endorsement, it's because we were sitting in a space in Austin, a community where Chairman Fred Hampton Sr., the founder of the Illinois Black Panther Party, lived in, he organized in, and was ultimately assassinated in a system that was tilted against him to begin with. And he was no criminal. He was no criminal. Mm-hmm. And they still used the law against him to execute him. Jail was just not enough, right? They jailed him too, but it wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it's unacceptable that we align ourselves in this day with groups like the FOP, for example, that are perpetuating this cycle of violence through the criminal injustice system. So I have a lot of thoughts on it. Clearly, I got a lot of thoughts.
Well, no, that's good. And you know, it goes back to, like, I think at the heart of so much of this is, you know, this idea, and I think this is why it butts up. It butts up with so many people's feelings, because we're fighting against a mythos, right? We're fighting against this idea of, like, this American exceptionalism that exists because, you know, right, we founded a country built on democracy and all men are created equal, and it's like, no, it was founded. The foundational bedrock was on exploiting other people to the betterment of others.
That's right.
And so,
and the enrichment, right?
Exactly. And so it doesn't really, in my case, in my opinion, I'm like, look, we are where we are. History has happened, and we cannot change it. But we do not have to pretend that it didn't happen.
Right. And
we can acknowledge it and do better. And that kind of goes into the point of, like, what I wanted to talk about now, which is reparations. And because I know that you say that, and I feel like there are some people who could be the most staunch ally, and then they're like, oh.
Reparations for the slaves? For the descendants of slaves? Yeah. It was even something that I had to grow in, you know, because we have been conditioned to believe that we don't deserve, right? That the Black American experience is both beautiful. W.E.B. Du Bois calls it the double consciousness of being Black and American, right? We have a history of resilience and triumph, and, like, there's so many great, beautiful things. I want to be Black in every lifetime. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't want to be anything else, but it is America's greatest horror story, what happened to Black people. And when I see this administration spring up an age of anti-intellectualism, where they don't want the next generation to learn the history, the treacherous history, a very violent history of what happened to the indigenous people, what happened to the Mexican people, what happened to Black Americans. That is what made me say, okay, I have to educate myself about reparations as well. And I have to be a part of this movement, because even if we don't get it in our lifetime, several lifetimes, it is owed to Black Americans to be paid back for building America into what it is. And so there are so many case studies that have happened around reparations, from the Jewish community and the Holocaust, right? That's like an international case of it, to the Japanese internment camps that happened here in the United States of America, where they were falsely and wrongly imprisoned and rightfully deserved reparations, right? And fought for it and got it. And when we look at the Jewish community, when we look at the Asian American community, they flourished economically. They were able to establish themselves in their communities. And when we look at the Black American community, there's a huge economic disparity that exists between us and almost every other group in America. Everybody is enjoying the labor of Black folks, the trauma and the pain of Black people. And so to me, it's like not even a policy thing, like it's a morality thing. And I have a really great community advocate, Lucretia Britz, who is, she made Juneteenth, she was a part of the coalition that helped make Juneteenth a possibility in Chicago as a citywide holiday through an ordinance. And she's a really good friend of mine. And Lucretia had watched me throughout the election cycles that I ran, and she was like, yo, why you don't have reparations? Like, that needs to be on your platform. And really pushed me on it. And it was because I was conditioned so much that reparations was like a moonshot.
Yeah.
That, like, that's not a realistic thing that you should add. And then I'm reminded of people like AOC, who in 2018, she ran on the abolition of ICE. And then she won. And then it became a call for everybody, right? She ran on a Green New Deal. And then it became a thing. And then they were debating it on the presidential stage. And so I think the possibilities are endless about why do we think that reparations can't happen for Black folks?
Yeah.
No one can answer that for me, though.
Well, I think, and this is the part where people get like a little weird about it, is like the idea that, oh, well, it's going to come from me, from my pocket. Like, I am going to get less of something because somebody else is getting something, right? So I think that's the idea that a lot of people, even I think like white liberals would have, is that, well, I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
Why am I paying for something that happened before I was born?
That's a very generous take, right? Like, that's a generous take for sure, y'all. I really truly believe that it's anti-Blackness that is keeping us from this equity of reparations. It is anti-Blackness. People do not believe Black folks deserve things, nice things. Our culture, the Black American culture, is the most duplicated, siphoned, appropriated culture on the planet. Like, not even just in America, but even within the Black diaspora. Yeah. We are replicated for things we do, whether it's hip hop or our clothes or our hairstyle or our slang or like whatever. We just really are, we really them, like, Yeah. And so it's that whole like saying and quote of like, you want my rhythm but not my blues, right? Like that whole thing, because people know that the dirty little secret in America is nobody would trade spaces and want to be Black. Yeah. They would like to cosplay us. They would like to wear us as a costume. They would like to use African American vernacular English, but then they would like to code switch back into the comfortability of privilege.
Well, it's the whole idea of like white replacement theory and whatnot. And they're like, oh, well, white people are going to be a minority in the United States by the X year. It's like, so you're saying minorities are treated different? Yeah. Is that? We got to preserve it because we're going to get treated like them. Yeah, like, they know what's up. Like, they can see how we're being treated. You know how, they hear amongst their own families how Black people are talked about. They see the videos of police brutality. They see the communities. Even here in Illinois 7, driving from Oak Park to Austin. Yeah. 10-minute drive, west to east, and you're in a whole nother world.
And so they can see that and they don't want that for themselves. And Dr. Guitry, I believe that's how you say her name, she has a theory called post-traumatic slave syndrome. And post-traumatic slave syndrome is essentially a theory that even though we're so many generations removed from chattel slavery, that trauma is embedded and it goes down generationally.
Yeah.
Right? And so we see that manifest in a number of ways within our communities. And so some people will make the argument that we don't deserve reparations because we're not going to do right by it. And well, I mean, we could make the same argument that y'all didn't deserve us to build this country as it is, but yet here we are, right? And so...
And to be clear, of course, like, this is the other thing, it's like, it wasn't like things, 1865 happened, 13th Amendment passed, and everything was great for Black people.
Right.
Like, the amount of... there's just this blind spot that exists between when slavery was abolished and, like, the civil rights movement, where... people are like, well, why didn't Black people get it together? We tried to get it together. Like, we had Black Wall Street. We had these communities that were standing up and building businesses, and people were flourishing, and it pissed off
white people.
And they came in and they burned it down multiple times.
They burned it down.
Tulsa,
Lake Lanier.
Yeah, Wilmington. Like, there are numerous.
There were the race riots here in East St. Louis, in Illinois. So that is 100% true. I mean, even in the Dr. King riots that happened in the 1960s on the West Side, they never rebuilt the West Side. After that, never rebuilt it.
Yeah. It
is still to this day not rebuilt.
And this is all in living memory.
People
who are alive, who experienced
our parents were alive, right?
Exactly. They experienced this, they lived through it, they saw it happen. My mother, was born in 55. She lived in a world where segregation ruled the land. My grandmother was cousins with Emmett Till. Like, this is all.
Well, we're literally, millennials are like the first generation of Black people that have had like full rights, and now we're seeing them being rolled back. Mm-hmm. So even when you describing like your parents being like, my dad was born in 1959 and my mom was born in the early 1960s, I tell my parents all the time, like, yo, you were born in Jim Crow. Like, you were actually born, and my dad was in Louisiana, so like he was born in the South during Jim Crow. The first, I ended up going to Louisiana State University. He was 8 years old by the time A.P. Thoreau, the first Black student at LSU, got admitted. They were not admitting Black students for the first 8 years of my father's life, and he is alive and breathing. And so, like you said, it was not that long ago. And
even the fact, I lived on the north side of Chicago. My father told me stories about, like, he took the red line or got on the wrong train one day and, like, got off on the north side of Chicago, and he was like, oh boy. And like people, like, I think it was like it might have been a cop that came by and was like, are you lost? Are you lost? Like, you're supposed to be up
It's a little dark outside.
Yeah, legitimately, the fact that I live now in a neighborhood that he would have been barred from living in, maybe not from explicit law, but very much redlining, very much like
sundown towns.
Exactly. People making it very clear you are not welcome in this part of the city.
So that brings up like just such a great point of like, yes, we've attempted as Black Americans to build up our community and do it independent. And there were a lot of conversations that happened even in the 1960s and the 1950s around the civil rights movement of should we be integrating, right? Like our communities, like, is this a safe thing to do? And, thank God, like we got to the point where that happened, and people didn't impede that. But some folks do feel like that slowed down our progress as well, because we could have been focusing, on building our economic power. But the argument then is, well, we did. And then it made white people mad.
Yeah.
We are sitting in a white lash right now with Donald Trump. We're paying 10 years after the Obamas have left the White House, and we are still paying back on the white lash of Barack Obama.
Literally, I remember it, like, because that was the big thing after he got elected. The term that they used on Fox News is what do we see? Like, is this the end of traditional Americans?
Wow.
And that's how they disguise it as traditional Americans. It's like, you know, it's the dog whistle thing. Like, just say it with your chest. Say what you mean.
Right.
So.
Right. The end of white people. Somehow.
Santa Claus is white. Everybody knows that. That's a fact. He's just white, okay?
The Tooth Fairy is white.
I don't remember there being a black Easter bunny.
Right. And like, I think that's a good point, and like segue to like the Obama administration. He didn't do a lot of work around reparations. And I remember one of the things that I remember being here in Illinois, and you probably do too, like with him, he was our senator, and like there was all of this talk about how we couldn't hold his feet to the fire on things like that, like a black agenda.
Yeah.
Because he was the president for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that this is an important question. That was a question that came up yesterday at the forum, is say it with your chest that you're going to support reparations. And I think we are in a time and an age where we should be talking about reparations, especially if you're trying to represent a plurality black district. This is something that could materially change people's life.
Yes.
And we'll talk about like what reparations can look like, but on the point of like politicians, how much pressure that must have been for him to not be able to have that type of agenda, because he was constantly being like pummeled for like wearing a tan suit, right? So imagine if he would have introduced reparations into the mix.
Yeah.
You know what that could have been like. And I do, you know, I do try to tell my peers and leftists in the space to think about that, what political courage looks like when it's easy for you to say that when your skin color is not being weaponized against you. Yeah. And we know what that feels like, to grow up in a world where literally people view our skin as a weapon. And so in that way, I give Obama some grace. I do wish that he would have pushed for it, but I understand the amount of pressure that could have probably been applied. Right now, I don't think there's any excuse. I think that we are building our own political movements. We're building our own political narratives on social media as social media grows. And there's so much so many studies and everything out there in knowledge for us that there's a strong case for reparations. Yeah. Right? And it has always been. And I understand, like, from a legal aspect of us having to qualify that and quantify that. But I mean, the proof is in the pudding. We are one of the wealthiest nations on the planet, and it was built off of the backs of chattel slavery. Yeah. And so that is a fact, right? And people were harmed. Generationally, people been harmed. And so I serve on the inaugural Reparations Task Force for Mayor Brandon Johnson. I was appointed, and I serve on the Justice Committee. And a lot of what we focus on is like police torture that happened in the city of Chicago, and how did that impact Black Chicagoans, you know, and our ability to get jobs, to feel safe, to, you know, obtain land, etc. And so many great conversations are coming out of this task force, and we'll be coming to the community soon. But so much great work is coming out of the task force. When you really sit down and scope it out, a lot of money is owed. Like, that's all I'm gonna say. Like, a lot of money is owed to Black America, and I think that's also part of it, is the payout. It's one, the anti-Blackness, but two, the payout that it is going to require to amend or start the process of amending what happened to Black Americans.
I think that's part of like the argument too against it, is that people would say there's no money for it. Like, where are you going to get the money from to pay for it? As is every progressive idea that we ever have, is there's no money to pay for it.
I mean, we can start on that military budget. We can start there.
Yes.
Because, I mean, we always have money for war. Mm-hmm. Wars that we don't even need to be a part of, we got money for. The Pentagon gets an expansion in their budget even when they don't ask for it. They don't have to ask for it, and they're going to get an expansion of it. And so the military budget in itself is like $1 trillion in itself. I think the Pentagon budget is like 800 billion or something like that, edging towards that. I mean, even if we took 10% of that, right? Not even that, leaves 90% of a budget that they could have. We could start putting a dent in the call for reparations and what that looks like. But we can't address any of these. The reason why I think we're coming to a head about a lot of issues in the United States is because America will not address the issue of what they did to Black America. And until you deal with anti-Blackness, it makes it hard to deal with immigrant rights work. It makes it hard to deal with healthcare equity. It makes it hard to deal with housing equity, because at the core of all of that, those barriers were initially put into place to stop freedmen from flourishing after they were freed from slavery. Yeah. That is what people aren't realizing. All of the civil rights battles we're dealing with now, you can stem it back to the Emancipation Proclamation. You can stem that back to Reconstruction, where Black people were building up their power, both politically and economically. And they started putting all these restrictions federally in place so that they couldn't succeed. And it impacted everybody. Yeah. It impacted everyone. And so
when the restrictions didn't work, they just kill you.
Exactly. Yeah. And so like that's why we have to deal with reparations, is because it's making an amends to all of the civil rights violations that we're dealing with to current day. Yeah. So what does reparations look like? You want to know that?
I want to know that, so let's know.
So I support HB 40, which is the study that would be put forth to assess, what would be the tangible steps that would need to take place in studying how massive the payback will be. And I do believe that you can't change what you can't measure, right? And so HB 40 is actually it was brought forth by former Congressman John Conyers. He passed it on to the late and the great Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, who unfortunately passed away a year or so ago. And now Representative Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts has taken up the helm of HB 40, and she keeps reintroducing it. And so I support HB 40 for the study. I think that reparations could look like a myriad of things. I think, one, we have to lift the economic boulder off of the Black community. And what that means is eliminating student loan debt, eliminating medical debt, mortgages, the pathway for us to obtain land. Most literally, our promise that never came fulfilled, 40 acres and a mule, right? We never got that. That means helping leverage the field so that Black folks can be entrepreneurs and open small businesses, and that we have dedicated money specifically for the Black community. I do believe that reparations is owed to those who are direct descendants of slavery in the United States. Because we have Black immigrants and folks who come here from Haiti and Nigeria, and the only reason why I say that is because we have to set a litmus test. Like in any legal case that you put forward, or a legacy clause that you put forward, there has to be a direct link to you being a part of that harm that was committed. And so, I think that those who are descendants of slavery, Black Americans who are descendants of slavery, are the ones who deserve reparations, in the same way that the Haitians deserve reparations from the French. And I can't just pop up over there and say, hey, France, write me a check. All right. So in that way, I think that it can be direct cash payments. Right? I think that it could be, I really am a huge proponent and advocate of land acquisition. I think that we need to reclaim the land. We see a Black exodus happening in the city of Chicago, where 250,000 people have left in such a short period of time. And it's not because they want to leave voluntarily. They're leaving because they're being pushed out and gentrified out of their communities. Places in New York like Brooklyn, where the brownstones have all been bought up by, white transplants, quite frankly. So I'm like flexible on what that could look like, but I think that the core of it is that we have to lift the economic boulder off of Black people, and we have to, America has to make a good faith effort to repair harm that has been done. Like an acknowledgement and apology and action, right? So those are the 3 A's: acknowledgement, apology, and action are the things that I think move us toward the direction of reparations.
And I'm always a personal proponent in like always selling, when you sell something, you always do like what's in it for me thing. Mm-hmm. And to people who are not Black, who are like, well, why would I want to hop on with this? It's like it stimulates the economy, mm-hmm. right? When people don't have to spend X amount of their paycheck excuse me, on medical bills,
yep.
on student loan payments, on mortgage or rent, etc. They don't just sit on that money. They put it back into the economy, and they start a business, or they go and buy a car, or they go and
or they patronize your business.
Exactly. So right. all of these aspects would come full circle, and when they start to lift up their own communities, then more businesses open, then less crime happens, then it is not people we can have resources in the neighborhood, so we don't have to do the teen takeovers downtown, which everybody's right. so upset about or whatever. And people want to stay in their own communities because they are safe there. They are comfortable there. They're familiar there, and so they don't feel like they have. The only time they can let loose and have fun is by going downtown with all their friends. Because, let's be real, that's the fun place to be. And also, for some people, that's an escape of where their community of the community that they live in, where they don't feel like they are safe even living there. So when we start to invest in those communities, it creates a society that is ultimately more profitable for everybody and safer for everybody.
Yeah, that, and yes to all of that, number one, but we never have these questions for billionaires, right? The biggest welfare queens in America is the billionaire. I mean, these folks get bailed out with our tax dollars constantly. And there is a never outrage, but it's to the argument that they always make is we stimulate the economy. We stimulate jobs into the economy. We eject jobs into the economy. And we know really it's because a lot of politicians are buddy with billionaires so that they can get campaign donations and build up power, political power. It's not always, what they're saying. But to that point, yeah, I mean, when the Black community thrives, everybody thrives. Because we've been so, even with the little bit that we've had in the United States of America, look at all we've created. Look at all we've contributed to society with nothing, without being offered reparations. And, nevertheless, we persist, without it. And so that is the strongest argument for reparations, is that it does generate a GDP and it stimulates the economy.
Well, to your point there, we can wrap up a little bit here, but I just wanted to add, when you talk about people taking from, Black culture and duplicating it and appropriating it, and to me, I've always thought about it this way. I'm like, Black American culture is one of the most profoundly American cultures. When we talk about American culture, it's
it's Black America.
We came to this country not being allowed to use our own names, not being allowed to speak our own languages.
Worship our own God, right?
We had to start from nothing. We started from nothing, and we created from scratch with other Black people to build what we have today. We couldn't go and trace our roots back to Nigeria, Cameroon, et cetera, et cetera. We had to take what we knew, what we had, which was basically nothing, and then build something out of that. And to me, that is the basis of so much of what we see today: the American culture, jazz, blues, dances, all this stuff that got appropriated into the mainstream American culture to where we are at today. That, to me, is we are the culture, right?
We are the culture, and yes, food, music, fashion, all of the things. But let me tell you what's even more important: political movements. Black America is the blueprint for the globe on how to resist opposition. Hitler and the rest of them studied racism in America and took it back and made it even worse, right? The same thing with apartheid in South Africa. It was the civil rights movement and leaders who were calling globally, because America is, people look to America on these issues. I mean, not very much lately these days, but they do look at us as a moral barometer about how, which is why like we see this huge push for Palestinian liberation and all, because we know that when we stamp it as okay, then globally it gives the okay for others to do that if they don't think that America is watching or like won't say anything about it. But political movements in general, like the civil rights movement was the blueprint for so much that, you know, the second and third wave of feminism, you know, the environmental justice fights, people use the Dr. King approach of civil disobedience and nonviolence that was implemented by Ella Baker Snick, Dr. King, to this day. To this day. You like the Sunrise Movement? They're using Dr. King's approach. You like Women's March? Dr. King's civil rights and non-violence and civil disobedience. That and marching and protesting, that was from the civil rights movement, and it was born out of the church basements of Black America on the campuses of historically Black colleges and universities. They were the heartbeat of that. Young people in Black America were the heartbeat of that. And the Black church played a crucial role in the civil rights movement. And so even when we think of great political leaders now, right, like grassroots leaders now, they drew from the inspiration. Bernie always tells a story about how he marched with Dr. King and got arrested when he was a student at University of Chicago. Like, that's his most infamous picture, right? And so his political philosophy was shaped by Black America, right? So we cannot separate the two. And because we cannot separate the two, and you can't remove us, this is our home. That kills me. When I hear the argument like, yeah, but where are you from? I'm from America. Like, you know what I mean? Like, my people from Louisiana. My people from Chicago, right? No, but what are you? Like, what type of African are you? It's like, no, my people have been here for over 15 generations. We built America. We built this. This is our home. So I never like those conversations of trying to separate Black folks from America, because we built it.
Yeah.
And so in spite of, and so I do think like that's an important context to reparations, is that the argument you just made, you can't talk about the United States without speaking about Black folks in the United States.
I think that's a great point. A great part to leave there. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Kina. And vote Kina.
Happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month. Vote Kina Collins, March 17th, or right now, because you should be able to vote early.
Early vote has started in Chicago. Go to KinaCollinsIL.com, sign up for a shift.